अब मेरा ना राइस से काफ़ी मन भर गया। आजकल मैं रोज़ राइस एंड दाल ही खा रही हूँ ना, ऐसा लग रहा है कि मैं अब नहीं खा पाऊँगी। टेस्टी भी नहीं होता, ऐसा फील हो रहा है। चार चोंदी। मैं खुद ही सोने का सोच रही थी। मेरा भी पढ़ने का थोड़ा ही दिल था, ये तो सही मन था, लेकिन दिन में भी तो दिन भर सोती हूँ। अराउंड 1 के आसपास उठी थी आज भी, तो क्या ही कर सकते हैं। अरे ब्लॉक करो इन सबको, क्या मॉडरेटर जल्दी जल्दी इन सबको ब्लॉक करो। ये कहाँ से आ गए? अदकारी अदाकारी तो ऐसी थी कि एक एक्टर बन गए होते, ब्ला ब्ला ब्ला। गुरु ज्ञान, क्या ज्ञान बांट रहे हैं। वैसे मैं सोच रही हूँ कि ना हम लोग ना इस चैनल को छोड़ के ना दूसरे वाले चैनल में ही पढ़े। थोड़े दिन बाद में आई थिंक हम लोग उस चैनल में भी पढ़ सकते हैं। यहाँ पर बहुत सारे लोग आते हैं। थैंक्स लोगन, थैंक यू नवराज। MDMG सब्सक्राइबर्स मोड ओनली, ओके। उसमें भी स्लोमो डाल देती हूँ। ड्यूरेशन बढ़ा के ना 10 मिनट रख देती हूँ ताकि ये लोग टेक्स्ट ही कर पाए। दीदी यू गेट अ हेयर कट? नहीं, हाँ श्री ने सही बोला। Ask me any question from biology. Okay. Who is the father of biotech? What are you reading so hard? Hey Logan, I'm not reading right now. मैं आउट हूँ। किस चीज़ में आउट हूँ? एम से है मैं भी। बायोलॉजी आई यू प्रीमेड? मेरी एक्सपर्टाइज नहीं है। गेम ओवर। चलो मैं ये चैट्स ऑफ कर देती हूँ, ओके। जब हम लोगों का ना दूसरा चैनल में जब हम लाइव सेशन करेंगे तो वहीं से करेंगे। शुभम और श्री, तुम लोग वहीं पर आ जाना। अभी के लिए मैं बंद कर रही हूँ। वैसे मेरा बहुत बक बक करने का दिल था, लेकिन आज नहीं कर पाऊंगी। गुड लक श्री, गुड लक एसपी। आदर्श तो दूसरा ही सेशन में अटका हुआ होगा शायद। आदर्श आई देयर? तो स्टार्ट करें? हाँ शुभम, लेट्स स्टार्ट। शुभम शर्मा को बोला। यार तुम दोनों चाहिए ना, शुभम 1 और शुभम 2 करो नाम। मैं कंफ्यूज हो जाती हूँ। ये लो बंद कर दिया चैट्स। ऐसे ही मैं कम इरिटेट हो जाती हूँ। जो तुम लोगों का नाम इतना सिमिलर है, और हो जाती हूँ। When a person is किसी ने बायो का क्वेश्चन पूछने के लिए बोला था ना, तो आंसर बताना. When a person is suffering from poor renal absorption, which one of the following will not help in maintenance of the blood volume? Increase atrial pressure in kidney, decrease atrial pressure in kidney. बताओ दोनों में से कौन सा है आंसर. Capillaries formed by dash okay afferent arterioles. Capillaries carried over efferent arterioles. Choose the incorrect statement regarding urine formation. Non-selective process. Filtration is non-selective process performed by glomerulus. Glomerular capillary blood pressure causes filtration of blood through 3 layers. A fall in GFR activates GG cell to release renin. Water but permeable to water but always transport of Henne's loop is permeable to water but allows transport of electrolytes actively or passively. Which of the following is most toxic excretory product? Ammonia. Which one of the following options shows the correct matching pair? Man, ureotelic, bird, uricotelic, fish, monotelic, frog, monotelic, ureotelic is correct. Frog भी ureotelic है. Reabsorption of K plus ion in the tubes of nephron occurs by the process of osmosis, diffusion, filtration, active transport. Kidney stones are produced due to deposition of uric acid and silicate minerals, calcium carbonate, calcium oxalate. Calcium oxalate, okay. Calcium oxalate. Renal calculi refers to the condition in which tumor is present. A stone is formed in kidney. Infection occurs in pelvis region. Urea accumulates in the blood. The correct answer is stone is formed in kidney. Renal calculi. Concentration of urine depends upon which organ? Bowman's capsule. Length of hinge loopicity. Network of capillaries arising from glomerulus. Length of Henle's loop. Long ducts of collecting tube extend from cortex to inner part of medulla, medulla to outer cortex, medulla to inner cortex, cortex to outer part of medulla. Long duct of collecting tubules extend from cortex to inner part of medulla, medulla to outer cortex, medulla to inner cortex, कॉर्टेक्स टू आउटर पार्ट ऑफ मेडुला, मेडुला टू आउटर कॉर्टेक्स नहीं, कॉर्टेक्स टू inner part of medulla. Long ducts of collecting tubules extend from cortex to inner part of the medulla. The human skin possesses sweat and sebaceous glands which eliminate some waste in their secretion. Sweat is a waxy, protective secretion having sterols. Sebum is an aqueous fluid. Sebum with NaCl, lactic acid, urea, amino acid, glucose. Only one. Human skin possesses sweat and sebaceous gland which eliminate some waste in the secretion. यही वाला करेक्ट है, बस हो गया. Excuse me. My eyes are burning. A 15-year-old. मेरे शकल ना आई के कारण ऐसा हो गए हैं. फसड़ हो गया है, फसड़. नहीं तो स्कूल ही जाता नहीं है क्या? पढ़ने के लिए तो बहुत कुछ है, लेकिन पढ़ने का दिल नहीं करता, वो अलग बात है. अरे भाई साहब, सो जाओ. गुड नाइट एवरीवन. सो जाते हैं. I need help. Need help. Need help. Help me. सो ही जाती हूँ. चलो आगे पढ़ सकती हूँ मैं शायद। आई नीड पावर, पढ़ने के लिए भी पावर चाहिए, अब क्या ही बोलूँ। बायोमोलिक्यूल्स, फोटोसिंथेसिस इन हायर प्लांट्स। ये फोटोसिंथेसिस इन हायर प्लांट्स आज मैं करूँ क्या? लेकिन मुझे पता है मैं ये चैप्टर पढ़ते पढ़ते बोर हो जाऊंगी, लेकिन कोई बात नहीं, पढ़ना तो है ही है, एक दिन ना एक दिन। भाई साहब इतना सारा मुझसे नहीं होगा, लेकिन तुम्हें पढ़ना होगा ही। मैं कैसे पढूं? बोलो तो मैं कैसे पढूं? मैं पढ़ती हूँ नया बुक से। या अल्लाह प्लीज हेल्प मी। मुझसे बिल्कुल नहीं पढ़ा जाता, रोने का दिल करता है, लेकिन मैं पढ़ूंगी, मैं पढ़ूंगी। चलो रोते रोते पढ़ते हैं, ओके? How many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 18 पेजेस हैं। 1 आवर में 3 पेज, ओके। 18 पेज डिवाइडेड बाय हाउ मेनी आवर्स? 3 3 1 3 3 6 3 6 6 आवर्स में होगा ये कंप्लीट। 6 आवर्स में, मतलब कि अभी पढ़ूँ तो सुबह के 4 बजे ख़त्म कर सकती हूँ। पढ़ते पढ़ते बीच में शायद आंसू निकल जाए, लेकिन तुम लोग पूछना मत, ओके? क्यों रो रही हूँ? क्योंकि पढ़ना बहुत मुश्किल होता है, इसलिए रोऊंगी, शायद बीच में रोऊंगी एक बार। आई कैन डू इट। All animals, including human beings, depend on plant for their food. Have you ever wondered from where plants get their food? Green plants, in fact, have to make, or rather, synthesize the food they need, and all other organisms depends on them for their needs. The green plants make, or rather synthesize, the food they need through photosynthesis and are therefore called autotrophs. You have already learned that the autotrophic nutrition is found in plants and all other organisms that depends on the green plants for food are heterotrophs. Green plants carry out photosynthesis, a pencil चाहिए मुझे, photosynthesis, a physicochemical process by which they use the light energy to drive the synthesis of a compound. Photosynthesis, a physicochemical process, photosynthesis, a physicochemical process by which they use light energy to derive the synthesis of organic compound. Ultimately, all living forms on earth depend on sunlight for energy. The use of energy from sunlight by plants doing photosynthesis is the basis of life on earth. Photosynthesis is important due to two reasons. It is primary source of the food. Photosynthesis is primary source of all food on earth. Photosynthesis is primary source of all food on earth. It is also responsible for the release of oxygen. Responsible for release of oxygen into the atmosphere by green plants. Okay. Primary source of food, and the other one is releasing O2 in the atmosphere. Oxygen in the atmosphere by green plants. Have you ever thought what would happen if there were no oxygen to breathe? This chapter focuses on the structure of photosynthesis, machinery, and various reactions that transform light energy to chemical energy. transform light energy into chemical energy. Okay, photosynthesis, a physico-chemical process. Photosynthesis, a physico-chemical process responsible for release of oxygen in the atmosphere, primary source of all food on earth. Light energy to chemical energy. What do we know? Let us try to find out what we already know about photosynthesis. Some simple मर गया ना? नहीं मरा, मुझे लगा मैंने मार दिया. Let us try to find out what we already know about photosynthesis. Some simple experiments you may have done in the earlier classes have shown that chlorophyll, green pigment of leaf, light and CO2 are required for photosynthesis to occur. Let us try to find out what we already know about photosynthesis. तो पढ़ सकती है हिमा, प्लीज पढ़ ले. Let us try to find out what we already know about photosynthesis. Some simple experiments you may have done in earlier classes have shown that chlorophyll, green pigment of leaf, light and CO2 are required for photosynthesis to occur. Chlorophyll, light and carbon dioxide. Chlorophyll, green pigment of leaf, light and carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide are required for photosynthesis. Carbon dioxide, chlorophyll and light. You may have carried out the experiment to look for starch formation in two leaves, a variegated leaf, or a leaf that was partially covered with black paper and exposed to light. On testing this leaf for the presence of starch, it was clear that photosynthesis occurred only in the green part of leaves in the presence of light. Variegated leaf. Okay. Yes, the question. Another experiment you may have carried out when a part of leaf is enclosed in a test tube containing some KOH, potassium hydroxide soaked cotton, which absorbs CO2. Potassium hydroxide, KOH soaked cotton, which absorbs CO2. A part of leaf is enclosed in a test tube containing some KOH soaked cotton, while other half is exposed to air. The setup is then placed in light for some time. On testing for the presence of starch later in the two parts of the leaf, you must have found that the exposed part of the leaf tested positive for starch, while the while the portion that was in the tube tested negative. This showed that CO2 was required for photosynthesis. Green part, and CO2. Okay. Early experiments. You can do it, Ma. You can do it. तू कर सकती है. मुझे तुम पे पूरा भरोसा है. It is interesting to learn about those simple experiments that led to gradual development in the understanding of photosynthesis. Joseph Priestley, 1733 to 1804. In 1770, performed series of experiment. Joseph Priestley, first scientist. Joseph Priestley. Okay, first one is Joseph Priestley. In 1770, performed a series of experiments. मुझे नहीं पढ़ना, तुम्हें पढ़ना पड़ेगा. In 1770, performed a series of experiments that revealed the essential role of air in growth of plants. Okay, Joseph Priestley performed a series of experiments. मुझे नहीं पढ़ना, तुझे पढ़ना पड़ेगा. Hey, Ima, please. I can do this. Joseph Priestley in 1770 performed a series of experiments that revealed the essential role of air in the growth of green plants. Revealed the essential role of air in the growth of green plants. Joseph Priestley, first scientist, revealed essential role of air in the growth of green plants. Priestley, you may recall, discovered oxygen in 1774. Priestley, you may recall, discovered oxygen in 1774. Priestley observed that a candle burning in a closed space, a bell jar, you may recall, discovered oxygen in 1774. Discovered oxygen, okay. Priestley, you may recall, discovered oxygen in 1774. Priestley observed that a candle burning in a closed space, a bell jar, soon gets extinguished. ABCD. Similarly, a mouse would soon suffocate in a closed space. He concluded that a burning candle or an animal that breathed the air both somehow damaged the air. But when he placed a mint plant in same bell jar, mint plant, okay, mint plant, which plant? Mint plant. In the same bell jar, he found that the mouse stayed alive and the candle continued to burn. Priestley hypothesized as follow. Hypothesis. Priestley hypothesized as follow. Plant restored plant restore to the air whatever breathing animals and burning candle remove. Plant restore the air whatever breathing animals and burning candle remove. Can you imagine how Priestley would have conducted the experiment using a candle and a plant? Remember, he would need to rekindle the candle to test whether it burns after a few days. How many different ways can you think of to light the candle without disturbing the setup? Using a similar setup as the one used by Priestley, but by placing once in dark and once in sunlight. Okay, same setup, once in dark and the once in sunlight. Okay, once in dark, once in sunlight. This one is Jan Eigenhaus. Jan Eigenhaus is the second scientist. Jan Eigenhaus, 1730 to 1799, showed that sunlight is essential. Sunlight is essential to plant process that somehow purifies the air fouled by burning candle or breathing animal. Eigenhaus is an Eigenhaus in an elegant experiment with aquatic plant. Aquatic plant showed that bright sunlight showed that in bright sunlight, small bubbles were formed around the green parts, while in dark they did not. Okay, Jan Eigenhaus. Okay, once in sunlight and once in dark. Purifies the air fouled by burning candle or breathing animals. Eigenhaus, in an elegant experiment with an aquatic plant, showed that in bright sunlight, small bubbles were formed around the green parts. Small bubbles were formed around the green parts while in the dark they did not. In dark they did not. Small bubbles were formed in light around the green part. Later he identified these bubbles to be of oxygen. Hence he showed that it is only the green part of the plant that could release oxygen. Okay. It was not until about 1854, okay, Jan Eigenhaus, green paths, forms oxygen. It was not until 1854, Julius von Zach. This is third scientist. First is Priestley, then Jan Eigenhaus, and the third one is Julius von Zach. Julius von Zach. Julius von Zach. Julius von Zach. Why my eyes keep on paining? कोई बात नहीं, it's okay, पढ़ना तो पड़ेगा. Julius von Zach provided evidence for the production of glucose. Julius von Zach. Production of glucose when plants grow. Glucose is usually stored as starch. His later studies showed that green substances in plant. Chlorophyll, as we know it now, is located in special bodies later called chloroplast. Chlorophylls are located in chloroplast within plant cell. Chlorophylls located in special body or chloroplast. Chlorophyll located in chloroplast. Julius von Zach. Special body is later called chloroplast within plant cells. Priestley, bell jar experiment. Then we have Jan Eigenhaus, oxygen. Julius von Zach, chloroplast contains chlorophyll and production of glucose. Okay, he found that green parts in plant is where glucose is made, and the glucose is usually stored as starch. Green parts in plants, glucose is made. Green parts in plants where glucose is made, and that the glucose is essentially stored as starch. सो जाऊं क्या? Now consider the interesting experiment done by T.W. Engelmann. T.W. Engelmann, 1843 to 1909. T.W. Engelmann, using a prism, he split light into spectral components. And then illuminated a green algae, cladophora, placed in a suspension of aerobic bacteria. उठ के भाग जाने का दिल कर रहा है मेरा. मैं इतना पढ़ूँ वही मेरे लिए काफी है. यहाँ तक प्लीज ना. Now consider the interesting experiment by T.W. Engelmann. Using a prism, he split light into its spectral component and then illuminated a green algae, cladophora, placed in a suspension of aerobic bacteria. Cladophora, placed in a suspension of aerobic bacteria. Spectral component. The bacteria were used to detect the site of O2 evolution. He observed the bacteria accumulated mainly in the region of blue and red light. Of the split spectrum. A first action spectrum of photosynthesis was thus described. It resembles roughly the absorption spectrum. Absorption spectra of chlorophyll A and B, discussed in section 11.4. T.W. Engelmann, 1843 to 1909. T.W. Engelmann. Prism. Using a prism, he split light into its spectral component and then illuminated a green algae cladophora. Placed in a suspension of aerobic bacteria. The bacteria were used to detect the site of oxygen evolution. He observed that the bacteria accumulated mainly in the region of blue and red light of split spectrum. A first action spectrum of photosynthesis was thus described. It resembles roughly the absorption spectrum of chlorophyll A and B discussed. मैं ना आई ड्रॉप लगाती हूँ, ओके? मेरा आई ना बहुत ही वो हो रहा है, ड्राई हो रहा है. रो नहीं रही हूँ, ओके, कोई क्वेश्चन मत पूछना। TW Engelmann, using a prism, split light into spectral component and illuminated a green algae cladophora placed in suspension of aerobic bacteria. Okay, green algae cladophora. TW Engelmann, using prism, spectral components, green algae cladophora, aerobic bacteria, green algae cladophora, prism, spectral components. Okay, the bacteria were used to detect the site of O2 evolution. The bacteria were used to detect the site of O2 evolution, used to detect oxygen evolution. He observed that bacteria accumulated mainly in the region of blue and red light of the split spectrum. A first action spectrum of photosynthesis was thus described. It resembles roughly the absorption spectra of chlorophyll A and B. By the middle of the 19th century, the key feature of plant photosynthesis were known, namely the plant that plants could use light energy to make carbohydrate from CO2 and water. Plants could use By the middle of the 19th century, the key feature of plant photosynthesis were known, namely the plant could use light energy to make carbohydrate from CO2 and water. The empirical equation representing the total process of photosynthesis for oxygen evolving organisms was then understood as. Okay. By the middle of the 19th century, the key feature of plant photosynthesis were known, namely that plant could use light energy to make carbohydrate from CO2 and water. Plant could use light energy to make carbohydrate from carbon dioxide and water. The empirical equation representing the total process of photosynthesis. For oxygen evolving organism was then understood as CO2 plus H2O, light, CH2O plus O2. CH2O represents carbohydrate. Okay. CH2O represents carbohydrate. Example, glucose, 6 carbon sugar. A milestone contribute to the understanding of photosynthesis was that made by the microbiologist Cornelis van Niel. 1897 to 1985, who based on his studies of purple and green bacteria, demonstrated that photosynthesis is essentially a light dependent reaction in which photosynthesis is light dependent reaction in which hydrogen from a suitable oxidizable compound reduces carbon dioxide to carbohydrate. Joseph Priestley, bell jar experiment. Then Jan Eigenhaus, aquatic plant, formation of O2, oxygen. Then Priestley, Eigenhaus, who is this? There is someone named Julius von Sack. Okay, Julius von Sack. Production of glucose and chlorophyll is present in chloroplast. Glucose, formation of glucose. Julius von Sack, formation of production of glucose. Okay, Julius von Sack, production of glucose. Then we have T.W. Engelmann, using prism, green algae, cladophora, aerobic bacteria, graph similar to absorption spectra of chlorophyll A and B. Roughly resembles the absorption spectra of chlorophyll A and B. Okay, graph. The site of O2 evolution, blue and red reason, blue and red light, spectrum. Then finally, Cornelius Van Niel. Cornelius Van Niel. Photosynthesis is essentially a light-dependent reaction. Hydrogen from suitable oxidizable compound. Okay. Cornelius Van Niel, who, based on his study of purple and green bacteria, demonstrated that photosynthesis is essentially a light-dependent reaction in which hydrogen forms a suitable oxidizable compound reduces carbon dioxide to carbohydrate. Photosynthesis is a light-dependent reaction in which hydrogen from suitable oxidizable compound reduces carbon dioxide to carbohydrate. H2A. Okay. In green plant, H2O. In green plants, water is the hydrogen donor and is oxidized to O2. Some organisms do not release oxygen during photosynthesis. Some organisms do not release oxygen, okay, donor and is oxidized to O2. Some organisms do not release O2 during photosynthesis. When H2S instead of hydrogen donor for purple and green sulfur bacteria, when hydrogen sulfide instead of hydrogen donor, instead when H2S instead is the hydrogen donor for purple and green sulfur bacteria. Purple and green sulfur bacteria, it's okay, ma. Purple and green sulfur bacteria, the oxidation product is sulfur or sulfate, depending on the organism, and not O2. When H2S, when hydrogen sulfate instead is the hydrogen donor for purple and green sulfur bacteria. Purple and green sulfur bacteria को इसको यो Cornelius Van Niel, okay. Purple and green sulfur bacteria, the oxidation product is sulfur or sulfate depending on the organism and not O2. The oxidation product is sulfur or sulfate depending on the organism and not O2. Hence he inferred that O2 evolved by green plants come from H2O. O2 evolved by green plants comes from H2O. O2 evolved by green plants comes from H2O, okay. O2 evolved by green plants comes from water, not from carbon dioxide, not from carbon dioxide. O2 evolved by green plants comes from H2O and not from carbon dioxide. Proven by Cornelius Van Niel. This was later proved by using radioisotopic technique. The correct equation that would repeat the overall process of photosynthesis is therefore 6CO2 12H2O at C6H12. C6H12 O6 glucose plus 6H2 plus 6O2 12H2, where C6H12O6 represents glucose. The O2 released is from water. Please someone, क्या बोल रही है ये लोग? सजना, please receive the call. व्हाट्सएप में बोल रही है. मुझे क्या, मेरा नाम तो सजना नहीं है ना. C6H12O6 represents glucose. The O2 released is from water. This was proved using radioisotope technique. Note that this is not a single reaction, but not a single reaction, okay? Not a single reaction. But multi-step process called photosynthesis. 12 molecules of water as substrate are used in the equation. Give it a pop. No, I can't. Excuse me, मुझे माफ कर देना. Not this one. Rohit. Rohitu. Excuse me. क्या हो गया, ये लोग क्यों ऐसा बोल रहे हैं? 1 मिनट रुको। हाँ, ये लोग ना पता नहीं क्या करते रहते, मुझे डरा ही देते हैं, पागल लोग। अभी का स्टेटस देखा? ओ माय गॉडनेस, क्या हो गया लुक, मैंने नहीं देखा अभी का स्टेटस। व्हाट द फक? वे अभी अब 1 मिनट। आई थिंक ना, मैं जिसके एक नागामीज फ्रेंड है, मैंने बोल रही थी ना मैं, वो मेरी रूममेट भी थी अभी। आई थिंक सी इज जस्ट 20 years old, ओके। उसका डेथ हो गया। 1 मिनट में कंफर्म करती हूँ, ओके।